What's up, everybody? On today's show, the SEC ain't dead yet. We got two teams into the Sweet 16, same amount as the Big 10 and the Big 12. Take a bow, Greg Sankey. Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along at today's show. We're going to recap all the basketball action from the weekend, men's and women's, and also get you caught up on some of the football nuggets out there, including a prominent running back arrested over at the University of Georgia. We'll get you caught up on all that. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire could feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Go post your job for free at LinkedIn Jobs, LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege, rather. LinkedIn Jobs terms and conditions apply. All right, let's jump into it. We got plenty to discuss, reacting to the news from over the weekend, and we got to start with the men's tournament as, hey, Nate Oates and Alabama, they got it done. Their matchup between the Tide and Grand Canyon was a physical one. Alabama beats Grand Canyon 72-61 on Sunday to advance to the Sweet 16. Crimson Tide brought the defensive intensity needed. Shots were not falling early. By the first time out, Alabama was 2 for 10 shooting, but eventually they got more shots to fall. Mark Sears, Rylan Griffin doing their things, and Mo Diabate stepping into the game, asserting his will, grabbing rebounds, making buckets, sinking free throws. And the Alabama Crimson Tide advanced to the Sweet 16. They will face number 1 seed North Carolina in Los Angeles coming up this Thursday. And this marks the third trip to the Sweet 16 for Coach Nate Oates at Alabama. So good thing he just got that big contract extension with the Tide, and he is earning his dollars so far. So congrats to the Crimson Tide and Alabama. They're moving on to the Sweet 16. The other team moving on to the Sweet 16, Rick Barnes and the Tennessee Volunteers. Dalton Connect scored 18 points and made 4 free throws in the final 8 seconds as the Vols topped the Texas Longhorns 62-58 Saturday night to advance to their Sweet 16 for the second straight year. Connect was Tennessee's top scorer in the hard-fought win over the Longhorns. It was a night where the Vols struggled, shooting 34% as a team. Connect came up just short of a double-double, grabbed 9 rebounds. Jonas Adu had 11 points, but Zakai Ziegler playing Iron Man. He played all 40 minutes, did everything he could to help lead the Vols past the finish line. Rick Barnes asked him at one point in the game, "Hey, you good?" And Zakai looked at him like crazy. He said, "Of course I'm good." That was according to Josiah Jordan James. But Rick Barnes saying he's an Iron Man, never takes himself out in practice. We practice hard. I asked him, I said, "You good?" "You good." And I trusted him. And so second seeded Tennessee, they advanced to face number 3 Creighton, 86-73 winner in double overtime over Oregon. So Tennessee, they have reached the Sweet 16 twice before under Rick Barnes, but lost both times. But this time they will have an AP All-American in Dalton Connect on their side. Let's see how far they can go. But to the rest of the SEC, Texas A&M, they gave it all they could against number 1 seed Houston late Sunday night. They forced overtime at the buzzer as Anderson Garcia drained a game-tying three-pointer, but just couldn't get it done in overtime. They lose 100-95. But Buzz Williams' crew, man, they fought hard. Tyrese Radford had 27 points. Wade Taylor had 21. And then the rest of the SEC, of course, Thursday, Kentucky fell to Oakland. South Carolina fell to Oregon. Mississippi State fell to Michigan State. On Friday, Florida lost to Colorado. Auburn lost to Yale. That one still stings. And then Texas A&M, Tennessee, and Alabama, they were the only teams to get it done in the first round of action. And with the Aggies falling, Tennessee and Alabama, the only teams to advance out of the first weekend. Now, Greg Sankey was taking a lot of heat. I was reading a ton of tweets on Thursday and Friday of people saying, "Oh, the SEC commissioner, he was advocating for a change to the NCAA tournament. a way to get more major conference teams in as opposed to the small dogs. And look, Sankey wants more money. He's going from 14 to 16 teams, adding 2 big brands like Texas and Oklahoma, and they want to maximize their revenue as much as possible. But with big-time SEC teams like Kentucky and Auburn losing to Oakland and Yale, a lot of fans very critical. We saw a lot of tweets out there. One read, Greg Sankey really just said the NCAA tournament should get rid of automatic bids. Right before 2 of the SEC's 3 best teams lost to Oakland and Yale. Another one said maybe Greg Sankey can get the NCAA to change the tournament rules so the SEC can replace teams that lose in the first round with more worse SEC teams. SEC was 1-5 in the NCAA tournament heading into Friday afternoon. So, look, you get it. The criticism was warranted, but nonetheless, a good rebound to get 2 teams into the Sweet 16 and as many teams as the Big Ten and the Big 12 did. So I joke, so take a bow, Greg Sankey. Look, I still don't agree with his sentiment. I still think the Cinderellas are what makes the NCAA tournament so fun. Smaller dogs who can make some noise. But I always say by the second weekend, we're kind of over the Cinderellas. When we get to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, you want the blue buds. You want the big dogs. You want 4 big brands going to the Final Four. But I digress. Let's see if Alabama and Tennessee can do that. All right, other SEC hoops news. A lot of attention is shifted to will John Calipari be back at Kentucky? We spent all of Friday's show talking about it. Well, Calipari, of course, under scrutiny after losing to Oakland in the first round and has left a sour taste in the mouth of Big Blue Nation. A lot of fans wondering, will he be back? Well, the College Game Day crew over the weekend, they raced to defend John Calipari. Jay Billis and Seth Greenberg called the idea of firing Cal absurd. Reese Davis insisted only 2 people on the planet could coach Kentucky, and that's Rick Pitino and John Calipari. Well, Matt Jones of Kentucky Sports Radio, he was keeping us up to date on everything going on over the weekend. He had tweeted out, he said, for a variety of reasons, I think we will know by the end of the day on Monday with the portal stuff happening, Cal's end of the year radio show, their athletic director, Mitch Barnhart, kind of not really saying anything the last couple days, being quiet. Matt Jones saying John Calipari will be back tomorrow, and my assumption is whatever happens will probably take place Monday evening or late Monday afternoon. Because of that, I suspect we won't know anything until late Monday or Tuesday. He said on Saturday there was a real sense of nervousness within the Kentucky program because of uncertainty surrounding Mitch Barnhart's intentions. He said the sense is that the money for Cal's $33 million buyout would be there if Mitch Barnhart decides a change is necessary. And he said that decision is entirely in the hands of Mitch Barnhart. Now, he said on Sunday, no one is saying anything. It's been radio silence for 24 hours. He said, I don't believe any comments, people saying things are leaking out, because he said those people who in the know would tell me. But he said if Kentucky hires the right coach when Calipari leaves, they will be good again. But here's a secret. He is leaving one day. And when he does, we'll have to rebuild. If Calipari ends up staying, you should cheer as loud as you can that they win every game next year. But he said, when I read things like we're going to lose recruits or our whole roster will leave, that will happen whenever Calipari leaves. So ultimately, he said, currently unknown what the final decision is going to be, but we should have an answer. And that's the tough part for Kentucky fans is, look, if you bring back Calipari, you know he's going to recruit well. You know he's going to have, NFL or NBA caliber talent on the roster. But, man, all these first-round exits. Was it one tournament win the last 5 seasons now? It's not been good enough. This isn't what the standard of Kentucky is. The standard of Kentucky is about deep tournament runs every March. I mean, if Cal had been to a couple of Sweet 16s in recent years and then lost in the first round to Oakland this year, you kind of chalk it up and go, look, tough team that hit a ton of threes. That guy who was hitting all the threes for Oakland, like you chalk it up to that. But it's that on top of all the early round exits in recent years. And so, look, sometimes things run its course, and it may just be time for a new voice in there, new leader. And again, some of the early names that have been thrown out there, Scott Drew over at Baylor, his name's been thrown out there. Some people have thrown out Bruce Pearl's name. So it'll be fascinating to watch and see what happens. But we should know something by later today, if you're listening to this podcast, on whether John Calipari will be back at Kentucky or not. A big, big decision coming for the folks over there in Lexington. And again, could make an argument either way. I just know this: if they stick with Calipari, like, are the season ticket holders and fans going to be super duper excited? And, hey, let's rah, let's go. Let's take my season ticket money. Let's renew. So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens there. All right. When we return here on Locked On SEC, we'll get to a football nugget over there in Georgia. Big time player arrested there. We'll get you caught up on all that here in just a second. But first, this episode is presented to you by our friends over at Nissan. This week's March Madness bracket highlight brought to you by Nissan. And each week we are picking one team that stands out, a team that's pushed it further than the rest, just like any of the all-new 2024 Nissan SUVs. These guys were able to take it to the next level. And today we're going to highlight the North Carolina Tar Heels. They can be described as an armada. This one seed is as hardcore as it gets out there, so it's no wonder they secured a spot at the Sweet 16 this Thursday against the Alabama Crimson Tide in the NCAA Tournament. They were a favorite picked by many to make a run for a championship. And obviously, they just won a title not too long ago. So North Carolina Tar Heels, very much like the Armada. But look, whether it's the Nissan Rogue, the Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada, you can go find your next big adventure. You just need to go shop at nissanusa.com. That is nissanusa.com. Go check out all the great vehicles they have for you. And again, something for everybody and a new adventure around every corner there. Shop nissanusa.com. Also, remind you, this episode presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Look, say goodbye to your busted brackets, because FanDuel is letting you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it is time to go dancing at America's #1 sports book. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even still pick who you think is going to win it all. Go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make sure you use that locked on. That's going to get you that special code. And they got everything up there for you right now, including all the Sweet 16 teams. You feel good on Tennessee. You feel good about Alabama. You think they can make a run. Go bet on them. You can go make it happen over at FanDuel.com/locked on. Bet on all the college hoops you want until they end up cutting down the nets. One more time, website, FanDuel.com/locked on. Get in on all the tournament action there with FanDuel. Going along here, Locked On SEC. And hey, if you guys have been watching Fox Sports or ESPN all day on your TV and you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting, make the switch over to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, we'll get back to basketball here in just a little bit, but we do want to switch gears, talk a little football, because, man, there was a couple of things that happened over the weekend, and one not so good for the Georgia Bulldogs. So let's jump into it. Let's do it. Let's go around the conference.
Boots out to the right. Takes the handoff. What a catch!
Around the conference.
And we head over to Georgia as Trevor Etienne, running back, making not the greatest headlines in his first spring over in Athens. The Georgia running back, who of course was a transfer from the rival Florida Gators, was arrested Saturday morning on multiple driving charges, including DUI. The Athens Clark County records show Etienne was booked at 4:35 in the morning and released on bond at 5:30 Saturday morning, charged with DUI, reckless driving, failure to maintain lane, improper driving on the road, and affixing materials that reduce visibility of windows' windshield. So his DUI charge is labeled DUI, alcohol, less safe. Under Georgia law, drivers can receive DUI, less safe charges, even if their blood alcohol content is below the legal limit if the officer finds the driver to be driving impaired. So we'll wait for all the legal stuff to play out there. But Dog Nation noting that Trevor Etienne, the first Bulldog player to be arrested this offseason. Of course, last offseason you had Jamin Dumas-Johnson, Jalen Carter, Marcus Roseby-Jacksaint, and Nylon Morissette, all facing driving-related arrests. And January of last year, you had, of course, the tragic incident with O-lineman Devin Willock and the staffer Chandler LaCroix losing their lives in that fatal auto accident. But Trevor Etienne, his transfer from Florida to Georgia, was one of the biggest storylines of this offseason in the SEC. In 2 years with the Gators, Trevor Etienne played in 24 games, logging 249 carries, over 1,400 rushing yards with 14 touchdowns. Also had 30 catches for over 200 yards in the score. And in that rivalry game, he's in Jacksonville. He had 11 carries for 53 yards and a touchdown against Georgia in 2022. And then last year, he rushed 7 times for 42 yards. So Bulldogs know him very well from his time with the Gators, and we're expecting to bring him in and be the man this year with all the guys that Georgia was losing to the transfer portal, or rather to the draft, with Dejon Edwards heading to the next level, and Kendall Milton. They do bring back Branson Robinson, Andrew Paul, but Etienne expected to be the guy. And Bulldogs 6 practices into the spring session, and many fans looking forward to getting their first look at Etienne at the upcoming Red and Black G-Day spring game on April 13th. So we'll see what happens with Etienne, if he'll be back in the fold there, playing in that spring game. But University of Georgia did release a statement later on Sunday. They announced Stephen Drummond, Georgia Executive Associate AD for Strategic Communication, said, "We are aware of the charges and are currently in the process of gathering additional information. This is a pending legal matter, and we will not have further comment at this time." So we'll wait to see on that. But of course, Kirby Smart can't be happy. Like we mentioned, again, this wouldn't be that big of a deal if they hadn't had all these other driving issues in the last year to 2 years. A lot of people were saying, like, what's going on at the University of Georgia? Why can't they get this figured out? Let's get some Ubers going. Let's get some, some Lyft gift cards or something for these guys. But nonetheless, solely mistakes. We'll see, again, keep an eye on that story, see what happens with Trevor Etienne. All right, some other news over at Georgia. Their 2025 recruiting class taking a hit as 5-star defensive lineman Justice Terry has been committed to Georgia over a year. He flipped his commitment over the weekend to the Southern Cal Trojans. So Justice Terry going to go to play for Lincoln Riley at USC. He's 6'5", 275 pounds, rated the number 2 defensive lineman, the number 2 player from the state of Georgia, and the number 8 prospect in the class of 2025. So that's a big-time loss there for the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, 24/7 Sports noted that Dell McGee was his primary recruiter, and earlier this year, McGee left to go be the head coach at Georgia State. So could be just that. Now, there was some good news. Georgia football did land a commitment at quarterback for the class of 2026. Jared Curtis, the number 1 overall quarterback prospect in that cycle, committed to Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs over the weekend. Chose him over the likes of Ohio State, Alabama, Texas, and Tennessee. He's from the Nashville area, rated the number 9 overall prospect in the class of 2026. And just one other recruiting tidbit here. A class of 2025 running back Gerard Pringle announced his commitment over the weekend to Miami. He had offers from both Alabama and Georgia. He's the number 21 running back in the class of 2025. So there you have it. That is the latest news going on around the conference. When we return, we will get into the women's bracket. We talked about the men's bracket. We'll talk about some of the SEC teams hanging around in the women's bracket. A couple of those teams punching their tickets to the Sweet 16. Still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. I want to remind you, this episode is presented to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are for that role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has all the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And LinkedIn is not just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process very easy for you to go through. Hiring is easy when you have so many quality candidates to choose from. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses can find a qualified candidate within 24 hours. And LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats these days, you might not have the time or resources to dedicate to a long period of time to hire. So look, go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Go post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. All right, one more segment here on Locked On SEC. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and checking us out. And again, if you have not checked it out yet, you need to go check out the Locked On Sports Today streaming channel on YouTube. All right, let's get into it. We did the men's bracket, so let's break down what happened over the weekend in the women's tournament. And in the women's tournament, we had Vanderbilt beat Columbia in the first 4 before Auburn lost to Arizona in the first 4. So that was before the tournament really got going. But on Friday, South Carolina, they rolled Presbyterian. LSU defeated Rice. Alabama beat Florida State. And Texas A&M lost to Nebraska, and Vandy lost to Baylor. So that was Friday action. On Saturday, Tennessee, they took out Green Bay, while Ole Miss beat Marquette. So it was a good day there for the SEC. So on Sunday, we saw Texas take down Alabama, so the Tide got eliminated. But number 1, South Carolina, they completely flattened their rival, North Carolina, 88-41. Dawn Staley's crew is they are on another level this year. They're just kicking butt and taking names. The other side, LSU used an incredible second half to come back and steamroll Middle Tennessee State. LSU was down at the half to Middle Tennessee. Middle Tennessee, playing in Baton Rouge on LSU's own court, took down Louisville, who was considered, everybody was kind of assuming, they're just going to play, they're going to advance and play LSU. And it was kind of an interesting one because Haley Van Lith, their point guard, transferred from Louisville this past offseason. So it would have been a great storyline. But instead, we got a great storyline of Middle Tennessee State playing their butts off and taking it to LSU, the reigning champs. But LSU just absolutely flattened them in the second half, outscored them big time. So we got LSU and we got South Carolina. Both punched their tickets on Sunday to advance to the Sweet 16. So that brings us to today, where Ole Miss is going to look to upset Notre Dame. They're a double-digit underdog. And meanwhile, Tennessee going to look to try to upset NC State. They're about a 5.5-point underdog in that one. So, again, one of those could happen. But right now, it looks like, at least for now, the SEC's got 2 men's teams in their Sweet 16, and the women have 2 women's teams in their Sweet 16. But could be more. See what happens today. But LSU and South Carolina punch their tickets to Sweet 16. We know the Gamecocks will take on the winner of Oklahoma, Indiana. They play later today. LSU will take on the winner of UCLA versus Creighton. UCLA is the 2 seed. And the last thing we'll say on this when it comes to the women's tournament, LSU coach Kim Mulkey lashing out, threatening legal action against the Washington Post on Saturday, where news came out that the paper has spent 2 years pursuing a piece on Kim Mulkey, which she referred to as a hit piece, and said that they gave her a deadline to answer questions this past week while they were preparing for the NCAA tournament. Mulkey said the lengths this reporter has gone to try to put a hit piece together. She did not mention him by name, but multiple reports saying that it is Kent Babb of the Washington Post. Mulkey said, after 2 years of trying to get me to sit down with him for an interview, he contacted LSU on Tuesday as we were getting ready for our first round game of this tournament with more than a dozen questions, demanding a response by Thursday. right before we're scheduled to tip off. Are you kidding me? It was a ridiculous deadline that LSU and I could not possibly meet, and the reporter knew it. It was just an attempt to prevent me from commenting and an attempt to distract us from this tournament, and it ain't going to work, buddy. That, again, a quote from Kim Mulkey. Look, I get a lot of people don't like Kim Mulkey. She comes across as very, some would say honest, some would say crass at times, but nonetheless, you always know where she stands on things. She doesn't bite her tongue. So, again, for me, the sport of women's college basketball has gotten so much more popular in these last couple of years. One big reason, Dawn Staley and what she's doing at South Carolina. And yes, you also have to include what Kim Mulkey is doing at LSU. She is a multiple national championship winner when she was at Baylor, and bringing her into the conference. I know if you're a fan of any team that's not LSU, you probably hate her, but that's a good thing. Sports need enemies sometimes. Sports need villains. As liked as Dawn Staley is, she's got some people who aren't fans of her. It's what makes this good. And when you're a winner, when you win a lot, people are going to find reasons to not like you. Look at LeBron James. Look at, Kobe Bryant when he was, playing with the Lakers. It's the winners. It's funny. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I think people are starting to feel that way about Patrick Mahomes now and the Chiefs. It's like, hey, we liked you when you were winning early and it was a fun story, but now you're winning too much. So anyway, look, I get it. A lot of reasons to dislike certain people. And Kim Mulkey is just one of those people that a lot of people just do not like. But again, the longer her team stays in this tournament, look, it'd be awesome to get a rematch and get an LSU South Carolina championship game. But still a long way to go. Caitlin Clark in Iowa might have something to say about that. They would meet up with LSU in the Elite Eight, most likely, if LSU could get past this next round. But the way South Carolina's played this year, and LSU's hung with them, right? I mean, went toe-to-toe with them twice this year into the final minutes before the Gamecocks pulled away. So maybe that is the team that can match up with them. But nonetheless, best of luck to the ladies and the men as they continue their run through toward a Sweet 16. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Come on back tomorrow on the show. We'll get back into some more football conversation. And hey, for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. It's called Locked On Sports Today. Just search it. You'll find it streaming live 24/7 with all the biggest stories of the day with our local experts Locked On, plus our national shows covering each and every league. So for your second listen, go check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Come on back and see us as we're talking all things Southeastern Conference.